Welcome to Policing TV. Each week we will explore the highlights from our latest videos, diving into topics like AI, technology, drugs, and the people shaping the future of policing. On 3rd March, we heard from Chief Inspector Darren Beech and Chief Constable John Robbins on the West Yorkshire Police's Race Action Plan, which aims to improve policing for Black and Black heritage communities. Chief Inspector Darren Beech discusses the progress made in cultural awareness training, the reduction of racial disparities in stop and search and taser use, and the importance of community engagement.
I started in November 2022. We've been centralising quite a few of the recommendations within the Race Action Plan and making sure our backroom processes and policies are fit for purpose. What we did then was in November 2023, the Chief held 2 roadshows in Kirklees and Leeds to officially launch the Race Action Plan to communities and to really get some collaboration with those communities so that they have a say in what our plan looks like.
Now, you mentioned your Chief, John Robbins. We're just going to break now for a moment to hear what your Chief Constable said in December to mark the first anniversary of the West Yorkshire Police Race Action Plan.
12 months ago, we launched our Police Race Action Plan, a plan to improve policing in West Yorkshire for Black people. At that time, I apologised to Black and Black heritage communities here in West Yorkshire. I apologised for the way policing and society had treated Black people in the past, and I promised change for the future. So I wanted to update you on that change as to what's happening. We have been continually learning, listening and questioning our own biases, policies and processes. We know we've still a long way to go, but we remain absolutely committed to earning the trust and confidence of Black and Black heritage communities through people seeing and feeling the change. The Police Race Action Plan was created to foster greater trust with Black and Black heritage communities and to create transparency and equity in our policing practices. So by way of examples, I can tell you what started to change here in West Yorkshire over the last year. We have reduced the racial disparity in the use of Taser and in the use of stop and search. This means that in comparison to other ethnicities, Black people are now less likely to be stopped and searched and less likely to have Taser used on them. We're now routinely reviewing the body-worn footage of stop and searches carried out on Black people, and we do this to ensure officers have behaved professionally and respectfully every time. We're checking things like, did the officer explain the reason for the stop search, and did they communicate politely and respectfully with the person being searched? One of the biggest changes we've made, which has gained national acclaim, is our cultural awareness training. So far, over 4,000 of our officers and staff have completed a 2-day cultural awareness training course focused solely on Black communities and policing's history with Black communities. The training will be completed by all 11,000 officers, and it's specifically around the experiences of members of the community of West Yorkshire that are given to those officers, the good and the bad. The course tackles difficult conversations head-on, conversations around racial trauma and white privilege. It's not like any other training we've done before. We're also attracting and supporting more Black heritage people to join West Yorkshire Police. In the past year, we've increased the number of applicants by 15%. We're still not representative of the communities we serve, but we're also starting to head in the right direction. So we're only a year into a long plan, but I want you to know that we're committed to that plan. We're committed to people seeing and feeling the difference. The change has started, but we will continue to improve our data collection and our analysis to better understand racial disparities, and local district teams will be taking the lead on progressing local police race action plans in a way that meets the needs of local communities. So I'm determined that West Yorkshire Police will improve policing for Black and Black heritage people. And I'm also determined that one day West Yorkshire Police will be an anti-racist organisation.
So thank you there to your Chief John Robbins for that introduction to the West Yorkshire Police Race Action Plan.
On 7th March, we published the 4th Policing Tech Forum webinar. this one on AI and its role in contact management. In this clip, we hear from David Jackson, the lead at the NPCCC's Digital Public Contact Programme,
which is the national programme within policing for transforming public contact. Some great reflections there from our previous speaker, Shub. Shub and I have known each other for a long time and share very much our thoughts around the opportunities where AI could really add value. It could improve efficiency, it could improve effectiveness, it could improve, most importantly to me, the citizen experience and outcome and their satisfaction. But let's first of all start with what we're doing nationally within the public contact arena. Policing receives about 33 million phone calls a year. It's about 20 million 101 calls and sort of 12.5 million 999 calls every year. That's an awful lot of conversations that are taking place. And to actually quote a poet from the early 1800s, an American poet, "The human voice is the organ of the soul," so said Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And I quite like that because voice is a really important communication mechanism. And in fact, 999, of course, the model for 999 hasn't changed since it was introduced in 1937. A caller who requires help phones 999, speaks to an operator, gets connected through to the relevant emergency services, and then help is provided. We'll come back to that in a short while. But actually, within those 32 million calls a year, we don't do a great deal with a lot of them. About 2/3 of forces don't log within contact systems or command and control systems every single conversation, every single call that comes in, which is absolutely understandable. It's probably not an incident under the national standards of incident recording. It may be for another reason that it doesn't need to be logged. But the challenge with that, of course, is that the details of that conversation have been lost. The only people that know about that conversation are the caller and the call taker that took the call. And in the forces that don't log every single interaction, between 50 and 60% of demand is unlocked. But we're still having to answer every call, and it's still consuming our capacity to be able to do so. And so one of the areas that we are currently working as a proof of concept with West Yorkshire Police is unlocking the value of voice by historically transcribing, as Shub's already described, transcribing the recordings of those calls to understand the totality of that demand.
On the 10th of March, we heard from Amy Watkins, the head of Pol Ed, an innovative educational initiative developed by West Yorkshire Police to enhance the understanding of law and safety among children.
Other forces at the moment, with 2 further forces onboarding as we speak, and an awful lot of other forces that we're in different conversations with at different stages of them presenting to their chief officer teams. It's been hugely successful in West Yorkshire. We're up at 95% of our schools now are registered, so getting close to almost 1,000 of our schools here registered, and more schools using Pol Ed. We've had an increase of 300% of lesson deliveries of Pol Ed this academic year compared to last. So schools really are engaging and really seeing the difference that Pol Ed is making.
So for those forces and jurisdictions that do take on Pol Ed, what's the journey they go through then? How would you describe the journey from expression of interest through to active engagement in Pol Ed?
So we have a really good service and delivery lead, Sergeant Tom Regan. He liaises with the forces in the initial stages. Often it's an initial presentation on Teams where it's shared with an overview of Pol Ed. We go through the video in more detail and the benefits that it brings to their force and the schools that sit within their force area. And then beyond this, we often then go to a face-to-face meeting. So myself and Tom travel to a lot of different forces and then present to the forces, the COT team, but also the local authorities, because it's really about the partnership between education, the local authorities and the police. So we provide forces with a really, really supportive model. Once we've done the initial inputs and a force on board, we help them through their journey with the rollout. So we provide them with a structure of what we recommend and suggest through our own experiences and through that of the other forces that have onboarded. We do initial launch conferences for them and present to various different departments and teams in the force, and that helps them with the initial communication and then initial rollout to schools. The aim there then is for the schools to start getting the schools in their force area to register to PolEd and then to begin to understand and start to use it. So when a force purchases PolEd, it is provided completely free to the schools that sit within their force area.
On the 12th March, we heard from John Sutherland, a former chief superintendent in the Met, and now an author, in conversation with Rick Muir, who shared his journey through policing, his reflections on violent crime, and the impact of politics and austerity on law enforcement.
Well, I could probably go non-stop for about the next 7 days on those subjects. So again, I will do my very best to be really brief. I'll start with a brief comment on domestic violence and then give you a little bit more detail around knife crime. And actually, many of the themes are sort of interlocking, interchangeable. My view on domestic violence is unequivocally clear. And I've said this and I've written this publicly on a number of occasions and in a number of different places. But my view is that domestic violence is a disease of pandemic proportions. It is a form of terrorism that is, and I don't use that word lightly, I use it very intentionally. It's the single greatest cause of harm in society. And actually, and we can get into this in more detail if you want to, if people are interested, but it's actually ultimately one of the most significant drivers of every other kind of violence in society, including knife crime. And on the subject of knife crime, I mean, I had my head in my hands again last week when the current government announced their big campaign around trying to limit online sales of knives. And in an attempt to be sort of pithy, I just retweeted the government announcement, and my only comment was that it was the wrong answer to the wrong question. And what we so often find with governments of every colour is they default to short-term quick fixes that aren't going to cost them very much money. So often you'll find that the first response from a politician to a high-profile crime problem is to suggest the need for some form of new legislation or regulation. And the reasons they do that, candidly, is because it gives the appearance of doing something, whilst in fact achieving almost nothing of any significance or sustainable impact. And so again, I've said and written on knife crime, I'll give you in 12 seconds flat my 5-point plan for knife crime. It's got to be long term, and by long term I mean 20 years plus. Yeah. It's got to be based on and sustained on a public health approach that recognises violence as a disease that can be caught and transmitted, but equally that can be diagnosed and treated. Third thing is that it's got to be operationally independent from political control. As soon as politicians get involved, it becomes short-termist. It becomes limited by the election cycle and the funding cycles that go with it. And when you're dealing with problems that have been a generation or more in the making, none of them are going to be fixed overnight. None of them are going to be fixed before the next trip to the polls. So it's got to be independent of politics. You know, towards the end of my career and in the early days of my retirement, we had this just, well, I was going to say farcical, but it's much worse than that, situation where you had a Labour-run City Hall in London and a Conservative-run Home Office, both saying things about knife crime, but both flat refusing to work with one another to do the things that needed to be done. I mean, even as I talk about it now, I feel angry. So got to be operationally independent from political control. Fourth thing, though, this may be less expected from me, I don't think police officers should be in charge of it either. I think policing absolutely needs to be at the heart of the response, but not at the head, if you want it put in simple terms. So policing has an absolutely critical role to play, particularly in the first response. But again, if you put police officers in charge, the tendency is towards enforcement-led approaches, which are not the long-term solution to anything. And then the fifth part of the plan, so point 1, long-term, point 2, public health approach, point 3, independent of politics, point 4, policing at the heart but not the head, and then point 5, an approach that recognises young people actually as part of the solution, rather than just defining them as the problem. So as I say, I could talk for 7 days about it, but those would be my headlines.
Lastly, in the first half of March, we heard from Andrea Schoten in conversation with May Britt Ronabro, who is the interim president of the Disabled Police Association. She discussed her unique journey from being a scientist to a police officer. She also shared her various specialisations within the police force and her ongoing battle with hearing loss, which has significantly impacted her career.
There's sort of two elements to my hearing story. The first element I should probably mention is, so when I did my initial recruitment medical screening to join the police, I realised I had a low-level hearing issue in my right ear, which is more the classic hearing loss you get with age-related hearing loss, so high frequencies. Didn't particularly cause me any issues, didn't realise that I had any hearing loss, didn't realise I suffered from tinnitus, which is like the constant sound in your ear. And when I saw an audiologist, he said, do you have tinnitus? And I said, what's that? And he said, well, do you hear noises in your ear, like beeping and aeroplanes, unpleasant noises? I said, yeah, they're there all the time. And I thought everybody had that, because I'd had it probably since a teenager. I couldn't pinpoint what age. He said, no, that's tinnitus. Not everyone does have that. I said, oh, okay. So completely unaware that I had that. And he said, it won't cause you any issue as long as you protect your hearing in your left ear. Otherwise, you'll really notice that you do have a loss in your right ear. He said, you won't be able to do firearms training, which I was never, but in the UK, obviously, we're one of the only police forces, or the only police force in the world that police by consent. We don't all carry firearms. So I didn't really want to carry a gun. I was actually okay with that. So just ignored it, carried on. And then in 2013, I had a very sudden debilitating attack, which was classed as labyrinthitis at the time, attack of vertigo. So everything, the whole world was spinning. My body didn't know what was up or down. I was being very sick. And that took me away from work for about 6 weeks to recover from that. I couldn't walk properly. It took a long time for my kind of brain and my nerves to realign, if you like, with balance. Everyone knows your ears are responsible for balance. But until you have an attack like that, you don't really appreciate it. And then, long story short, it never really went away. So at this point, I was a PC in Aldershot on response, again, 2 young children, and I thought, okay, this is going to go. And then when it didn't, I did what I cringe at when other people do. I went onto Google, I Googled my symptoms and went to the doctors and said, I feel really embarrassed saying this. I think I might have a condition called Meniere's disease, because I've looked at this list of symptoms and I have like 99% of them. Which is, tinnitus in my left ear, which was so loud I didn't even hear it in my right ear anymore. Vertigo attacks, getting really dizzy, lack of balance. And then there's no test for Meniere's disease. You have to rule out other things. You have to have an MRI scan to check if there's any tumours there. So I had to have medication for vertigo migraines to check it was that. And then after a period of years, got the diagnosis in 2013. And I remember I was on maternity leave with my second child when I got the diagnosis. And I thought, oh, my lifesaver. I'm not going to be able to drive a car. They're going to take my driving licence away. They're going to sack me from my job because I won't be able to do it anymore. It was huge, really, really huge. Yes. And almost a grief for my health and a grief for my hearing loss. Wasn't that bad at that point. Because basically with every vertigo attack, it damages the cells in your ear. So your hearing can drop. And that is what's happened to me in the long term as the years progressed. And I still managed to stay on response for all this time. I never had a vertigo attack frontline at all. They were always bizarrely on my rest days. People would say to me, oh, it's caused by stress. And that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because why am I not having it in these really stressful situations I'm dealing with? So,
thank you for watching. Tune in next week.